Darna Zaroori Hai was released in 2006 and is a horror anthology film. And in this movie, a group of kids are reined in a scary house and listen to an auntie tell scary stories, not knowing that they are part of one. My favorite time of the year is here, Halloween season, spooky season, horror season, whatever you want to call it. It's here. So I thought, why don't we look more at Bollywood horror movies? It seems that every year since I've started this channel, I started doing a couple of Bollywood horror movies. Some that I haven't watched. It's really cool to get some horror movies under my belt, especially with Bollywood, because Bollywood doesn't do that many horror films, so it's cool to explore them. Now, I did the previous one to this. So the first movie that came out, Darna Mana Hai, I did that one. It's my most viewed video on my channel. Special thanks to y'all for that. That actually did really well, and a lot of y'all kept saying, hey, why don't you review the sequel, Darna Zaroori Hai? I finally had time, so let's talk about it. And by the way, I know this movie came out in 2006, but I am going into detail, so I'm going to be spoiling the crap out of this movie. So here's your warning, let's get to it. So our movie starts with our opening scene, and it's this guy watching horror movies, and he's just laughing really hard, and he's just a gross human being. Okay, I don't know how old he is, but he asks his mother to give him money so he can go watch a movie. What movie do you ask? Oh, Darna Mana Hai. So, very meta in this opening sequence. His mother says, you're going so late, you're gonna miss the movie, but he's like, oh, don't worry, I'll just cut through the cemetery like I usually do. And his mother says, no, you will not cut through the cemetery, because on this day, the witches come and they're gonna take you and kill you. And he just starts laughing. He's like, oh, there's no witches, you crazy woman, I'm going through the cemetery. So what does this guy do? He goes to the cemetery and starts desecrating graves and starts peeing on trees to prove that there's not a witch. Like, why? Just why? Like, there was no need for you to do that. It was gross and just very inappropriate. He goes to the movies and he gets a ticket and like nobody's there, and we just get this horrible sequence of him going back and forth between the concessions and watching the movie, and he's just downing popcorn, and it's just gross. And while that's happening, we're also getting a recap of what happened in the first movie. Like, I didn't like the first movie, okay? There are people that like the first movie, that's fine. I personally didn't like it. So why is it when I'm watching the sequel, I am getting a full-on recap of what happened in that movie? So after he watches the movie, he goes through the cemetery again, but he starts to freak out because he starts hearing this jingle sound. His mother told him that on this day you'll know a witch is near if you start hearing her anklet. So he starts hearing the, the ching sound, so he starts freaking out. So he starts running, and as he escapes the cemetery, he turns around and like there's this cardboard cutout of like a witch or whatever it is. He has a heart attack, and as he's about to die, in his pocket was change, because that's what he used to pay for the movie. He had change, and he realized that the ching sound that was happening was actually his pocket change, and there was no witch. So he dies, but doesn't that kind of prove his point in the beginning of the movie that there was no witch? Because there wasn't a witch. It was just a cardboard cutout. So he was right in the end? I just feel like it would have been better if there actually was a witch, to show that like, oh, this whole thing is real. It kind of made the opening a bit flat. I didn't like the opening of this movie, to be honest. I think the character was gross. Like, the whole desecrating the cemetery was so unnecessary, and the compilation of watching the movie was just really weird and just didn't have good pacing in general. So we finally meet our main characters, and I gotta say, bold choice, very bold choice to have kids as your main character, because kids are such innocent creatures. Like, they don't understand anything. Yeah, they know right from wrong, but they are just so innocent and don't know any better. So I think it was a very interesting choice. I think it's cool, like, to have kids as the main characters. I know in horror movies, the one thing people hate is like, oh my god, like, I don't like to see animals hurt and I don't like to see kids hurt. Well, get ready to see some kids get hurt. So the kids are walking, and all of a sudden it starts raining. And I think that's an underrated trope when it comes to movies. Like, it's a bright and sunny day, and then all of a sudden just pouring tsunami level rain. It's like, that is so not how the weather works, but it's okay. I like when horror movies get a little bit campy. So with the rain, they're trying to find some shelter, so they go into this really creepy house. They go in, and there's this auntie there that's there to meet them, and right off the bat, the auntie is like super creepy. She's like, Beta, stop saying. I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna leave immediately. It's a big house. They ask the auntie, they're like, oh auntie, aren't you scared? And she's like, I'm always scared in this bungalow, Beta. And one of the kids, he's like the cocky one, he's like, I'm never scared of anything. And she's like, oh, really? I got an idea. Why don't we go upstairs and I'll tell you scary stories, and I assure you that you're gonna be scared at the end of it. First of all, no. I will take my chances in the rain, because if she just looked at me and said it like that, I'm about to be like, you know what, I'll take my chance with the rain. Alright, finally time to get into our first official story, and in this story, our characters are Amitabh Bachchan and Ritesh Deshmukh. First of all, star-studded cast. Unbelievable. I thought the first movie had A-list actors. This is like A-list actors. This is unbelievable how they were able to get Amitabh Bachchan in this movie. So Amitabh Bachchan is a professor in this story, and I think Ritesh plays like his student or some kind of like advisor or something like that. They start talking about some science stuff or whatever, and then all of a sudden, every time they're talking, Amitabh just keeps looking to the side. He's like kind of zoned out, and like Ritesh is like, yo, you okay, bro? And he's just like, yeah, I'm fine, I'm fine. Then all of a sudden he starts freaking out. He's like, there's this dude that's like in my house. And Ritesh is like looking around like, no, there's not. I will say this, I give Amitabh Bachchan a lot of credit because he's such a good actor. Like 1 second he's like calmly telling the story, but like, hey, there's this dude in my house. He just like walks around. And all of a sudden in like a split second, he like starts freaking out. He's like, look, he's there, he's there, he's there. He's just like frantically like running around. I gotta give him a lot of credit because he had me on edge with that because like he was so calm and all of a sudden he did like jolted, like brought energy to me. So great job there. Now, I like the story to begin with, but the ending was so utterly ridiculous. They're talking and then all of a sudden Amitabh Bachchan's like, look, he's there, and it cuts to the mirror and it's like, I can't even explain what I saw. They show the dude and like he's wearing a beret and his clothes are and his face is dark for some reason. Like I don't know if it was the lighting or with the makeup or whatever, but for some reason his face just looked a lot darker. Maybe they're trying to cast a shadow over him, but like it didn't look good. It looked really goofy, and like it made no sense because Amitabh Bachchan said the guy in the house is trying to become me. Wouldn't it have been creepier if they showed like an evil version of Amitabh Bachchan? But no, it was just some dude, and like that's how the story ends. So talk about like a really good premise and then like horrible execution, terrible ending. Get ready to hear a lot of that throughout these stories. It sucks because I'm gonna tell you this right now, a lot of these stories, I really love the concept and I like how most of them start, but the pacing for all of these is so atrocious that you don't really care how it ends, and most of the time the ending doesn't really make sense at all. That happens for all of these stories. So after the first story is told, we cut back to our main characters, and one of them is like, oh, can I go to the bathroom? She goes to the bathroom, but now she's going, the door locks, and she's trapped, and we're left to go to our next story. Our next story, our main characters are Arjun Rampal and Bibasha, which is insane to say, by the way. Like, again, A-list cast. Anyways, so Arjun Rampal's car breaks down, so he goes to the nearest house. It's Bibasha's house. And he's like, hey, my car broke down. Can I use your phone to call a mechanic? Even though it's like, you know, 2 in the morning. So she invites him in and she's like, oh, don't worry. We can call a mechanic if it doesn't work out. Don't worry. Like, I have a spare bedroom. And she's like seductively looking at him. And I'm like, okay, I'm uncomfortable already. As Arjun Rampal's trying to call somebody, he sees a photo and it's Bibasha with some dude. And he asks like, oh, is this your husband? And she goes, yeah, but he's dead. He's been dead for 2 years. And he goes, oh, I'm sorry. And then she goes, I'm not. And he's like, what? She's like looking at him like so seriously. And I'm like, as soon as I heard that, again, I'm closing the phone book and be like, you know what? I'm gonna take my chances. I'm gonna take my chances out in the street, maybe hitchhiking, because I am not staying here any longer. Then as he's looking in the mirror, all of a sudden this dude in the photo shows up. It's the husband. And he's like berating Arjun Rampal. He's like, how'd you get in my house? And Arjun Rampal's like, your wife let me in. And he goes, is this some kind of joke? My wife's been dead for 2 years. And naturally, Arjun Rampal's just freaking out about it. But then you find out that Bibasha and that dude were just playing a joke on him the entire time. They're just harassing this random dude in the middle of the night. So naturally, Arjun Rampal is upset about it. They keep doing the same joke over and over again, like pretending to be ghosts, but they're not actually ghosts. And then at some point, the guy's like, yeah, my hobby is calling ghosts. So what does he do? He brings out the Ouija board to call somebody. He's just like doing the Ouija board thing. And Arjun Rampal's like, dude, can you like just call the mechanic? Like, this is so weird. Like, what is going on right now? And Bibasha's like, I always like knowing if ghosts are here or whatever. Then a frantic knock is at the door. The husband runs out the door and he yells for his wife. Bibasha comes out and it turns out that Arjun Rampal was dead the entire time in a car accident. So when they were calling the Ouija board, they accidentally called the ghost of Arjun Rampal. Here's what I don't get. Why is it when the cops show up and they're investigating everything, Arjun Rampal is like evilly smiling at them? He's like, oh, like it's hard to get rid of me. Why is he an evil ghost? Like, what about him is evil now? Like, I don't understand. He was super like calm at first, and he's like actually it's so weird. Like, again, like the execution made no sense for the story. He has no motive to be an evil spirit. And why would he be evil in the first place? So again, we cut back to our main characters, and the girl comes back, but she's oddly quiet. And so the other kid's like, hey, can I go to the bathroom now? And the auntie's like, yeah, just down the hall. So he goes, and while he's going to the bathroom, he realizes that the friend that came back is dead because she's right there next to him dead. And he's like, oh my God. And he's trapped in the bathroom. So you find out that one by one, these kids are going to be picked off and they're being replaced by demon/ghost children. Anyways, it's a little scary because, you know, kids are, you know, being killed. And that's always unsettling, no matter how the movie is made. All right, now we go to our next story. It is Sunil Shetty. So Sunil Shetty is a husband. And all of a sudden there's a knock at his door. And who is at the door? None other than Rajpal Yadav. Hopefully I'm saying his last name correctly. Rajpal Yadav comes, and I'm sorry, this man just has a direct line to my funny bone. He always makes me laugh. Every time I see him, I immediately think of Chota Don. So he is such a good actor. He really makes me laugh. So I just couldn't help but giggle every time he was talking throughout this story. Rajpal keeps telling Sunil Shetty about life insurance. And I'm a little surprised that Sunil Shetty doesn't have life insurance. He's like, dude, I don't have life insurance. I don't want life insurance. Whatever, okay? That's not the whole point of the story. Anyways. They start getting super aggressive because Rajpal's like, oh, anything could happen, you know? Life is scary. Like, you know, anything could happen. Accidents happen. And he starts bringing out items in his suitcase like a gun, a knife, poison. He's like, look, all of these, you could be given some of these at any point and you could just die. So it's important to have life insurance. I'm like, this is a weird sales pitch, man. That's what even Sunil Shetty says. He's like, dude, this is a weird sales pitch. Get out of my house. It starts to get super aggressive, and the next thing you know, Rajpal feels insulted. He points the gun at him. He's like, look, you think I want this? Huh? I haven't eaten in like 3 days. Again, what does that have to do with the story? I don't know. But they start fighting, and all of a sudden, Rajpal gets shot, and then he says like, oh, accidents happen, and then he just dies. What was the point of this story? Like, I don't even know what the message was. That you need life insurance? That, like, don't trust salesmen? Don't let weird people in your house? I don't know. Anyways, next kid comes, she's dead. The next one goes downstairs for water. That one is killed, rinse, repeat. On to our fourth story. Anil Kapoor is a director, and he really wants to make a horror movie. So he's like, I need some inspiration. So I'm gonna go on a drive and find some inspiration. There's this girl asking for a ride, and it's Malika Sherawat. And I think this is, like, in the point where, like, she was, like, really big for, like, a couple of movies. So at the time, she was, like, a really big name. She gets in the car and they start talking about like, oh my God, you're such a famous director. I love all your movies. He's like, oh, thank you. I know. I'm so good at what I do. So she keeps talking about like, oh, I love your movie. I was gonna go see it. And he's like, I don't get it. You say you're a big fan, but you haven't seen any of my movies. Like, what do you mean? And she goes, well, I was supposed to see your movie, but I'm dead. And he's like, what? And she's like, yeah, I'm dead. You know, like, I'm dead, and like my whole thing is that like I let men pick me up and I lure them in and then I brutally murder them. And Anil Kapoor's just like, the heck kind of girl did I pick up? But he like keeps it going. Like she's like, I'm just joking, silly. And throughout the drive, she keeps doing that. She keeps doing jokes about how like, yeah, I'm dead. I'm a ghost. I'm gonna kill you. And then like Anil Kapoor's like, so you want to come to my mansion? No, bro. You stop the car, you push her out, then you leave. What is with these characters? I'm sorry. Maybe this is just me. Maybe this is just like the viewer, you know, having the perspective of like, oh, what an idiot. But like, come on. If I'm in a car with somebody and they start going like, I'm dead, I'm gonna brutally murder you, I don't care how long I've known them. I'm going to rightfully stop the car, I'm going to open my passenger door, and I'm going to Spartan kick them out of my life. He invites her to his mansion, and he's like, oh, look at my beautiful mansion, I'm so rich. So she goes to the bathroom, and when he's sitting there, the lights go out. And he's like, oh, don't worry, I'm here. And she's just saying, but like, I'm not, because I'm a ghost, remember? And he's like, okay, stop playing around. And then she starts like revealing like, look, did you notice that like my car wasn't even there when I said that my car was wrecked, and saying like all this. And he started to like put it together like, oh my God, she's right. And she revealed that like I was supposed to meet a boy, but he took advantage of me and then he kicked me and I died. So now my whole thing is that I'm going to kill men who take advantage of women. And he starts naturally freaking. He's like, look, I'll drop you off anywhere, blah, 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 blah. And he's like, you men are all the same. And all of a sudden the lights go on. She has like this huge scar. And he freaks out. He keels over. And like, I think he died of shock or maybe a heart attack. And the weird thing is, the way this story ends is she takes it off. It was all makeup. And she's like, I'm an actor, sir. I was trying to audition for you and show you that I could be good for your movie. What? I have so many questions. Number one, that's how you audition? Why was that how you audition? You could have done so many things. How about you get to know him a little bit more and then you say, oh, by the way, I really want to be in your movie. Can I audition? There you go. You didn't need to pretend to be a ghost and a murder victim to try and scare. What did you expect him to say after you scared him so much? They're like, oh, scene. You think he's gonna say, my God, you're a star. No, he's gonna be like, get out of my life. What is wrong with you? So again, we go back to our main story. Another kid dies. We're down to one. Rinse, repeat. Here we are for our final story. A man is driving drunk He calls his girlfriend and he's like, oh, I'm not drinking, don't worry, while he's downing a flask. So while he's driving in the pouring rain, there's this woman that just is in the middle of the road, like turned to him, like turned away. So he stops and he goes out to see her and he goes, hey, like, are you okay? And he just starts screaming and we don't see the lady. All of a sudden it cuts to him in jail. He's locked up. And the cops are saying, like, why'd you do it? He's like, what do you mean? And they start, like, yelling at him and berating him and questioning him. And naturally, he is so confused. He's like, I don't understand. Like, what have I done? And they're like, you've murdered somebody. He goes, I didn't murder anybody. Where's that girl? And they start laughing, like, what girl are you talking about, you crazy guy? And they leave. So the arresting cop brings in this woman. This woman starts beating up the main dude who was cuffed. And she says, you killed my son. You killed my son. So you find out that her son is dead. And the cop is like, okay, this guy killed your son. Where's your daughter-in-law? And the mother was like, my daughter-in-law left. She cheated on my son. She's gone. Whatever. All of a sudden, the guy who is handcuffed starts talking like a demon. And he's like, no, I'm the daughter-in-law. Then you find out the woman that was on the road was actually the daughter-in-law. She was murdered by her husband, the mother, and the husband. They all burned her alive, you know, because you can't just divorce people anymore. You go from 0 to 100, like, oh, mom, I don't want to be in this marriage anymore. Okay, we'll just burn her alive. Like, how about you just divorce her, man? Like, it's okay to just leave once in a while. So the demon that's possessed the dude says, like, oh, I killed your son. I took advantage of this poor guy. I controlled him, and I murdered him, and now I'm going to murder you. Then she transfers her demon soul to the cop. The cop then turns and shoots the mom, okay? Demon leaves. Then the cop comes back to her. He's like, oh my God, I killed the mother. What do we do? So then the inspector, the guy who's handcuffed, and some random cop are all burying all the bodies. That way nobody gets in trouble, which is insane to say. So then the main guy from the beginning gets in the car, and then the ghost behind him says, I still have to kill my father-in-law. So just drop me off and I'll leave you alone. And then that's how that story ended. I gotta say, really, really good story. I actually really enjoyed that one. I enjoyed the previous two stories. Even though the Inokaburo one was super campy, I still enjoyed it. And this one, I gotta say, really, really good story. I actually wish it was its own movie. That's how much I liked the concept of it. We go back to our main characters, and it's the one kid who's left, the one who says, I'm not scared of anything, and his 5 other dead friends. And the auntie's like, oh, that's it, no more stories. And he's like, wait, that was only 5. What about the 6th story? And she goes, oh, you dumb child. The 6th story was happening all along. And then it cuts to like all the kids being dead, and he starts to realize what's going on because they all have weird, creepy eyes. So he tries to escape, but the door just wouldn't budge, and then the creepy old lady's like, don't worry, don't worry. And then it cuts to daylight, and it turns out all the kids are dead. Then you go to the guy who was like the caretaker of the house, and the cop was like, hey, where's the old lady? And they go, there is no old lady. She's been dead for a long time, okay, but she really, really loved kids, so nobody really knows how the kids died. And then it cuts back to the house where our ghost children and the auntie continue to tell ghost stories, and then our movie ends. I gotta say, vast improvement from the first movie. I think the first movie is just utter garbage. This one has a lot of problems. I think the stories are either super inconsistent or just don't have good writing and don't have good endings. But I gotta say, the last 2 stories I really liked. I liked the Anil Kapoor story, and I really liked the daughter-in-law story. That was really good. Overall, guys, when it comes to this movie, I like this one more than the first one of this horror franchise. I think it has better characters. I think the stories are a bit better. But like the first movie, the execution just isn't that great, and some of the writing isn't so great as well. I don't think I'm probably gonna rewatch this movie. I really don't have a desire to, unless I'm gonna sit down with my family on like Halloween night and be like, oh, let's just watch some cheesy horror movies and probably pop this one in. But I don't really have a desire to rewatch this one. So overall, I'm going to give this movie a C+. The first one I gave an F because it's rightfully deserved, but this one, I'm gonna be nice and give it a C+. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. I'll see you next time.